The work into making a hockey broadcast happen starts long before puck drop. Let's talk about that and more on this episode of Peach State Puck. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Georgia hockey fans. I am in a good mood because as of recording this, I am 3 days away from being a married man. As by the time you'll be watching this, I'll be married. I'll be soaking up the sun in St. Lucia, and hopefully that means you guys have a little bit of grace that you can send my way, because since I'll be in St. Lucia soaking up the sun, I'm not going to be able to record an episode of this show. So there will be no new episode next week, but do not fret. We will be right back into it the very next week, talking more about hockey around the state of Georgia. Speaking of which, looking for people to talk to, especially on the Savannah Ghost Pirates side. Have some things I want to talk about with their organization. I think they're a very special team, and I want to talk about what makes them so special. So if you guys have any contacts that you can send my way, especially inside the Savannah Ghost Pirates organization, that would be extremely helpful to me. Before we jump into the meat of this episode, let's talk about some of the news that's happening with our Georgia hockey teams. We talked about that Columbus trade last week that was teased as a blockbuster on social media. Well, the two players that have been brought in via that trade have now signed elsewhere. Malik Johnson signed with the Knoxville Ice Bears. Malik, obviously being a former Rock Lobster, me being the Rock Lobster broadcaster. Seeing some of the forums, I had heard rumors about the Ice Bears signing someone in the Athens organization. Well, I guess Malik wasn't a part of the organization anymore. Was signing a former Rock Lobster. And when I had heard that, I thought Malik was probably going to be that player, because I know he's a close friend of Mitch Atkins, who is currently a Knoxville Ice Bear. And so if somebody was going to fit that mold as a former Rock Lobster to go to the Ice Bears, Malik made the most sense. The other player acquired in that trade was the big body defenseman Rasmus Asp, who made his name as a Monroe Moccasin over the past couple of years. He has just signed with the PD Ice Cats, who are also making the jump up to the SPHL. And so now you take a look at that, blockbuster trade, and you say to yourself, on both sides, will anyone who was involved in that trade be playing with their new teams next year? We'll see. You never know. Malik or Erasmus could potentially, spend some time in the Fed next year. I would doubt it, but you never know. Things happen. Minor league hockey. Meanwhile, checking in on the Athens Rock Lobsters, they're slowly kind of going through their signees and their returners. We talked about 2 signees last week. We have another 2 to talk about here, and they're kind of interwoven with each other. Athens fans will remember that 2 of their big contributors throughout the last season was Daniil Glukaryov and Gleb Banderkin. And there was some visa issues that kept them from finishing the season in the FPHL with Athens. Now, I think it should be easier for them in the next season, because the SPHL league office is a league office that tends to help more on the immigration and visa side of things. So now you have both of your Russians back, Daniil Glukaryov and Gleb Banderkin, or who, as I call, the Russian Rifle and the Moscow Mule. They will both be back for the 2026-27 season. Big news for seasons up ahead. Savannah and the Florida Panthers have extended their affiliation throughout the 2028-29 season. The upcoming season will be the 3rd year of the partnership, with the Charlotte Checkers remaining the AHL level of the developmental chain. So Big things there for Savannah. They get to be a part of the development of a well-run organization. Florida having gone back to back, having a little bit of a struggle year this past season, but even Florida had mentioned Savannah as a great part of their player development, and it looks like they'll be a part of the Florida organization for now at least through 2029. So we'll see if there is anything more on that. Something that I've noticed on the Ice Cove, you might recall in our very first episode, that was something that I was rather quite excited about. The Ice Cove, the practice facility that would also include a youth development pathway. And something that I've noticed with that is that the date of completion seems to be in flux. It was originally slated to be completed in the first quarter of 2026. That is now passed. That language then changed to August 2026 in some places, and now on their website, it's being described as late 2026. Does August fit in that mold of late 2026? If I'm thinking in my own mind of what month that language might mean, August wouldn't be that. So we'll see. We'll keep our eyes peeled for any update on that front. We talked a little bit about the Columbus River Dragons. There's also news affecting them and the rest of the teams in the FPHL. Basically, the Fed and the SP have swapped regulations around how points are earned in their respective leagues. The FPHL announced midweek last week that they've adopted the more well-known 2-1-0 system where a regulation win is worth 2 points, an overtime win is worth 1, and a loss is worth nothing. Or rather, a regulation win is worth 2 points, an overtime loss is worth 1. My apologies. And a loss is worth nothing in regulation. This news comes about a month after the SPHL announced that they'd be going to the 3-2-1-0 model that FPHL fans were aware of from years past, where a regulation win is 3 wins and 3 points, an overtime win is 2, an overtime loss is 1, and a regulation loss is worth nothing. So the Fed and the SP more or less have traded the way that they count their points, and should be interesting because there's already teams that would think they were getting used to a new point system, and now they're not. The Athens Rock Lobsters making their move from the FPHL to the SPHL, and that means some changes in broadcast coming up too. We'll talk about those here in just a second, but we're going to kind of pull back the curtain as we do in this show and tell you a little bit more about what goes into making a minor league hockey broadcast happen. If I was to just randomly kind of make a mantra on what it takes to be a sports broadcaster, it would be that it's 90% preparation and 10% perspiration. Now, I perspire pretty much doing anything, but what is the most important thing about hockey? It's the players on the ice, and that's typically where your preparation will start. You go ahead and research kind of the basic information. If you're lucky, hopefully you'll have what's called a word roster. It's a Word document that has your basic information. Players organized by number, their name, their birthplace, their height, maybe a college they went to, something like that, depends. And from there, if you were given that, you'll be able to start your research into each player. If you're not given that, there's a little bit more rigmarole that you have to take. Throughout the week, especially when Athens was in the FPHL, I would be taking a look pretty much once a day at the FPHL's transactional page, where you're reading how players are getting cut, or players are getting signed, or players are getting traded. And from there, you would have to go and then look at what teams you're preparing for and how they've lined up over the past few games, because often enough, you might think it's a reliable source to get information, but the Federal Hockey website is more or less relying a lot on personnel from the team to update the website or update the information that's on the website. And because of that, it's not always accurate. And so what helps me the most in preparing for the next game is game sheets. That was the way the system was on the Fed side. You would have a game sheet that has the player and the number that they wore in that game, because often enough you see a lot wrong numbers on roster pages. Really throughout minor league hockey it can happen, but on the FPHL side you saw that quite a bit. And so you have to double check, triple check information to make sure that it's accurate. From there, you go into these players and information about them. Now, the way that I've always done my research is I'll go to your favorite search engine of choice. For me, it's Google. And would not just type the player's name in, but would also type, quote, their name, because that would help me see just where their name was used first and last. Because oftentimes, if, say, you're typing in a Russian name, we talked about Athens re-signing Daniil Glukaryov. All of a sudden, I'm hearing about, some other jabroni named Daniil who's not Daniil Glukaryov. And I don't want that. I want somebody who is just the person that I'm looking for. And from then on, I can even get more specific about where I want to find their name being used. For example, I'm looking here at my roster sheet. Carter Shinkarik, a native of Langley, British Columbia. Maybe the local paper in Langley is the Langley Herald. And so I'll look up, quote, Carter Shinkarik, end quote, Langley Herald, and be able to see if there's been any articles that had been written about Carter Shinkarik in the local editorial that is local to his hometown. So that gives me information about not only information about Carter, but potentially also information about where he's from. So that'll take me right into my spotting board, and hopefully it comes out well here. Let's take our view here. Okay. So here you have my spotting board, and we'll try and take you through the elements of it. First, obviously, I have the team name, and this is the last spotting chart of last season. So this was the last playoff game against the PD Ice Cats for the Athens Rock Lobsters. I got the Y, as Athens had clinched the top spot in the Continental Division, how many points they earned, their record. I've got, if I could zoom in a little bit here, it was the first year of the Garrett Rutledge era. A little bit of information about him, what happened in the last game. I take you into the corner and show you what they did last season, more information about Garrett Rutledge as a coach, talk about last shutouts and last shutout against, shorthanded goals for, shorthanded goals against, special teams numbers. Usually these would be my last 5 games and my next 5 games, but this was just a playoff series and what had happened. And then you have all of your players here. So let's take a look here at, let's just pick a random player. Jesse Lowell. He was the first player to re-sign for Athens for the upcoming season. Let's see what I have here on him. 26-year-old forward Jesse Lowell out of Northbrook, Illinois, 6'1". At the time, he had 16 goals, 38 assists for 54 points. Had 5 points over his last 3 games of the regular season. I also mentioned that his profile has changed a lot from the beginning, has added a lot of grit to his game. Was a 2-year captain at the University of Arizona and represented the USA in the World Cup of University Hockey. So that is kind of just a microscopic look at somebody that, you want to try and get their story or as much of it as possible, because while the most important part of my job is to take you through the action that's happening, Think of it as an action movie. Yeah, you like to see the explosions, you like to see the fights, you like to see the car chases. But at the end of the day, you have to care about who these people are to really feel like you have skin in the game. And so I try to put the spotlight even more on players so that fans can see, maybe in many ways, more of themselves in the players on the ice. After that, you start getting into the technical side of things. So throughout the week, I'm taking a look at my analytics. Okay, we got this many viewers on our last broadcast. How am I going to get the broadcast out to the people? I've got to start generating YouTube links as it was in the Fed, and obviously they're making a move to Flow Hockey, or the Athens Rock Lobsters with their move to the SPHL, and would have to generate YouTube links, send them out to people within the organization so that they have them available and they're potentially able to put them out on social media or what have you. We primarily worked through YouTube in the Athens organization, and that was more or less the regulation through the FPHL. Now, sometimes you work through different mediums, and different mediums means different preparation, different style. The first season of Athens Rock Lobster hockey, we were on radio as well. And because of that, I had to tailor more of my style to the radio side than to the visual side, or to the televised side, if you want to go that way. And because of that, people who are just listening to the game need so much more detail to be able to visualize in their head what's going on in the game. And maybe it was probably annoying at times for people who are just watching it to hear my radio broadcast. That was why I was happy to kind of transition purely on the televised side of things for the next year. Not because I didn't want to be on radio. It was difficult, though, to be able to try and service both broadcasts the way they need to be serviced on both the radio side and the televised side. And then that leads us to kind of the show itself. And what goes into the show is so much more than just adding my voice on top of the game. I really think in the FPHL last year, we had the best score bug in the game. And so much of that was because of two people. Number one, someone who introduced himself to me. He's what makes this show, Peach State Puck, so visually stunning. And that's Steven Turner. I can reminisce a little bit about how that all went down. I had done the first couple of games for the Rock Lobsters in Monroe, and man, they were just a disaster. They were filmed on a cell phone. I tried to make the score bug myself. It was really, really bad. And I didn't have a ton of time to make all of that happen anyway, and was scared about how even to just broadcast a game out there in the first place. And maybe after those first two games, I get a LinkedIn message. It says, oh, this guy has broadcast and production experience with the UGA Ice Dogs. And his name was Steven Turner. And basically, just out of the kindness of his heart, said, hey, like, I'd love to be able to help you out. I'd love to be able to make the show better. And Steven Turner didn't make the show better. Steven Turner made the show a show. He is what made it what it is in every sense of the word. Somehow, my ugly face, I've got the voice for a face for radio, and maybe the voice for televised sports, but my ugly mug is somewhat representative of the broadcast side of things for the organization. But everything that was the detail strokes of the large painting in general was masterminded by Steven Turner. He really made the broadcast what it is from its very beginnings to now, and it's because of his expertise and his creativity that we were able to make it as strong as we have, or strong as Steven has. And I guess what I'm figuring out is that you should just have a bunch of people named Steven around you at all times, because me and Steven Turner would eventually meet somebody who was a season ticket holder right on the glass at Aikens Ford Arena, somebody who reached out to us, whose name is Steven Self. And he really helped us on the technical side of things. He streamlined everything with our score bug and with our ticker and so on and so forth, and just made it feel like an NHL game, like a big leagues production. And without him, I feel like we wouldn't have. It really feels like Steven Turner is the heart of the operation. Steven Self is the brain, and then I don't know, where I fit in. I'm just the gristle, I guess. And with their help, they help streamline a lot of what you see on the broadcast. Steven Turner especially, he's helped me come up with starting lineup graphics, which finally I was able to help him out a little bit and start doing most of those myself towards the end of the season, but everything is formatted by him. He would help me make our YouTube material, like our coaches' corners and what we call our lobster tail segments, which are player interviews. And we were able to use those as material through games and through the intermissions to be able to give people something to digest in between games without me just kind of rambling or trying to find something to talk about. It also gives me the chance to go and use the restroom or take a breather or collect my thoughts about the story of the game before going into the next period. And with the show itself, you often enough have to think on your feet. There's been a couple of occasions where there's long officiating timeouts. There's a brawl and we have to take 10, 15 minutes to iron out all the penalties before we move on with play. And I try to keep it light and I try to keep it comedic. Something that was very special to the Athens Rock Lobster broadcast, I think, was how animated our YouTube chat was. And I think with that, it was a double-edged sword for me. And meanwhile, the pro side of that sword was so much sharper than the negative side of that sword. But, you're trying to think on your feet. Hockey is a quick sport as it is. Keeping your eye on the game, collecting your thoughts, trying to thread the needle for the story and trying to take that thread and make something that is feasible as one fabric of something. And every now and then you'll look at the chat and you'll see like, oh man, this broadcaster sucks. Or, he wasn't passing to that guy, he passed to that guy. And as much as I loved the chat, there are those moments where you're like mentally defeated for those 5 seconds, and that can take your focus away from the game. Ultimately, though, I think the pros far outweighed the cons. And usually those people are, coming in to hate. They're fans of other teams. They're having fun themselves. At the end of the day, it all adds to our viewership and our analytics anyway. So we appreciate the views. The way that we all make it happen, though, is right here. We have our stream deck, and we didn't have this throughout our whole time broadcasting for Athens. Now, a lot of times you might see something like this for a Twitch streamer, something like that. And what this does is this controls everything that you see visually. So with this, I can click buttons and send it to commercial or bring up a player card if someone scores a goal. Steven Self made it to where we were able to control all of our score bug through the stream deck. Steven Turner had tried to convince me for a long time to buy one of these, and I was like, nah, we've done it the way we've done it for long enough now. We don't need to add any other cogs to our production. And man, it just changed everything. It changed absolutely everything, and it made everything really feel so much simpler. And very, very grateful for Stephen Turner eventually twisting my arm enough to convince me to buy one. So with that, there can also be a lot of ugly that happens in the broadcast. In the press box at Athens Ford Arena, there's only power outlets on the second row of the press box. I'm at the bottom on the front row. And then in the second row, all the power outlets are up there. So we have long extension cords run from my setup to the back row to be able to supply our broadcast with the power it needs. And more often than not, the opposing team, the broadcast power that they need. And a lot of times it's no one's fault because it falls out super simply. A shoelace making contact with it has often enough pulled extension cords out of the power outlets. And so there is sometimes just time where we lose internet because our switch is no longer powered, or we lose our ability to, more often than not, it's internet, and then the broadcast just goes down, and hopefully we can get it back quickly enough. But it could be your laptop goes down. If you don't have a battery that's strong enough to power it without, a wall outlet. So yeah, there have been times where in the middle of a broadcast, I realize what's happening. I run back up, get on all fours, and plug the power back in, and run back. There's no commentary for however long it is, 30 to 45 seconds. And we'll score a goal, and I'm out of breath having run back and forth to try and get the power back on. But at the end of the day, in those moments especially, I'm much more cognizant about the opposing team's broadcast, because ultimately, while it's nobody's fault that the power gets kicked out, it's definitely not their fault, and they're not expecting that kind of environmental thing to happen. So I want to make sure they get their broadcast up and running as soon as possible. There has been, I think, just once where the internet went out at the arena about 30 minutes from game time. And I'm partially freaking out at this point, but not really, because something that I have that many broadcasters throughout our level of minor league hockey don't have is an ace team over at Athens Ford Arena. Just a bunch of great people who work on the production side of things and who work on the tech side of things, the IT side, to make sure that if we have internet that's down, it has typically only lasted like 10 minutes before they're able to get it back up. My biggest chink in my armor has been penalty shots. Luckily, I don't think there has been a penalty shot scored in Athens Rock Lobster history. Now, I'm talking about when a player is driving the net, they get taken out from behind, and like an in-game, in-regulation penalty shot, not penalties at the end of the game, not sudden death, not the shootout. And there's been a few times where I think kind of everybody in the building freezes and doesn't know what's happening. So we see that there's a penalty. I think we're going to break, and we're going to have a power play coming up after this. So I sent it to commercial. Next thing I know, the player is skating up with the puck from center ice, going towards the net for a penalty shot, and I'm missing it, and the fans are missing it. And so I try to rush on over. I'm hoping to be able to be a little bit more cognizant of that in my game. I guess, too, because it doesn't happen every game. You're not getting penalty shots all the time. And there's not an announcement on the loudspeaker, so I'm just trying to get a feel of everything, and you're going by the status quo, the rhythm that you're used to. Needless to say, whenever there's a penalty shot, it greatly does something misaligning to my rhythm in the game. But while there are dark moments, or there are moments where I freak out or crash out and cry, there are so many moments that I've been proud of to call for this team and look back fondly on. whether it be the very first goal in Monroe, or whether it be a big win in Binghamton, or whether it be that first playoff win in the tank last year. As a matter of fact, one of those games prompted one of my favorite goal calls that I've ever had. There was a quick move to the back door where Orca Weisblatt finished off a goal. This was in the playoffs in the 2024-25 season, going up against Columbus, and he scores a big-time playoff goal early in the game, if I recall. And my goal call was Killer Instinct from the Killer Whale. The Rock Lobsters with the possession held here in the offensive zone. Milan, he's feeling the buzz here early, and it squeaks through! Orca Weisblatt, the Killer Whale with the Killer Instinct, makes it 1-0. A little more than a minute gone in this game. There's a lot of sadness around that too, because if you don't, maybe you don't know, not too long after that in the offseason, Orca would sadly lose his life. And he was someone who was just such a special character and had such a special story, coming from being a child of two deaf adults to being a pro hockey player and being a part of this huge hockey family. It was a call that I was proud of then, but it's a call I'm even more proud of now, because it was Orca supplying us with one last special moment on the ice. And at that time, I thought we all thought there was going to be a lot more, and there should have been a lot more. And wherever Orca is, just hoping that he's resting peacefully. But, Orca became something so much bigger for the organization last year and for the team as a whole. After every game, his jersey becoming a part of the post-game celebration, or also the post-game losses as well. He was part. We lifted his jersey, win or lose. So everything was for him, and I think me and a lot of the boys too would have loved to make the end of that season a little bit different, to be able to dedicate that to him especially. But maybe it's going to happen next year in the SPHL. And with the move to the SPHL, there's some changes that I need to be able to brace for and be able to adapt to. The big one is that the Athens Rock Lobster broadcast will be moving from YouTube to Flow Hockey. There are a few different technical things that will have to change. Flow Hockey primarily uses an encoder box. So we'll see how we adapt to that. I'm hoping that we could still use our score bug that I still think is extremely special. I think it was the very best in the Fed. I think it could be the very best in the SP as well. I just think you want to be able to give the fans a product that is worth them spending their time and money on. And the production is my baby, but just like a baby anyone else raises, it takes a village. And the village that I have around me to make the production happen is not just a collection of people that I went out and sought and said, okay, here's some money. I paid you for your services. No, a lot of times it was a passion project for them as well. And they wanted to have a piece of the broadcast that they contributed to. And as far as Stephen Turner and Stephen Self, they have more than just a piece. I'm 10% of the broadcast. They make up 90% of it between the two of them. And because of them, we have a big league feel, I believe, to our production. And while I'm the Athens Rock Lobster broadcaster, I have so much to owe them. I want the show to feel like you're popping up a game on cable television to watch, and they've helped me do that. So I've asked a friend for some help here for the end of this podcast, and this is how we'll end the show today. I have some quick fire questions that I'll try to answer as quickly as I can. And the first one is my biggest broadcasting influence. As many of you might know, I'm a New York Rangers fan. And Sam Rosen, because of that, was a big influence on me. But right now, the current broadcaster, Kenny Albert, this guy is just a legend. Like, what he's doing right now is unprecedented. He's the only guy right now, I believe, who does play-by-play commentary for the 4 major sports in the United States. He does baseball, football, hockey, and basketball. I mean, it's insane. The next question I have here is, do you prefer broadcasting radio or television? Each have their own charms. I think television, especially with the speed of hockey, is a little bit easier because you have the assumption that there are things that the viewer can see on the screen. That sounds stupid to say it that way, but in radio, they can't see anything. Everything that they're absorbing about the game is something that they have to translate from audio to a visual in their mind. And so you're trying to be as descriptive as possible. Meanwhile, I feel like I'm much more of an energy guy than like a details poetry kind of guy. And with that, I feel like I'm able to lean fully into the energy rather than put all of my energy into being descriptive. What's the hardest part of calling hockey? The speed. Again, going back to radio versus television, the speed is already difficult as is. When you're having to describe everything, it gets that much quicker on you. How do you identify players so quickly? Practice makes perfect to a lot of extent, especially if it's a team that you're consistently calling. You kind of know just either how a guy wears his helmet, where he tucks his jersey in, or how fast he is, about what his height looks like on the ice, the way he skates. I think you kind of put all of those things into effect. What players they play with on a line with, or are they on the power play? Are they on penalty kill? All of those kinds of factors help with that. Hopefully, your numbers pretty good, because that's what I lean on the most. But sometimes you have teams that are in jerseys that the numbers are just absolutely horrendous. I'm not trying to call out anybody who worked on the jerseys for the team, but the PD Ice Cats last year, I think it was, they had a black jersey with baby blue numbers on it. And man, you could not see the numbers from the bird's eye view that you had in the Florence Center. You could not read the numbers at all from that distance. And that kind of leads into my next question. Which arena has the worst broadcast position? The Florence Center has it now it's improved from the beginning of last year, because the broadcast position in the Florence Center came from the corner, and they put new lights in some point in the middle of the season. And with that, they moved the old lighting rig out. The lighting rig before that, from your perspective in the broadcast booth, blocked out like a whole corner of the ice. So you had no idea what was going on. You had to go over and look at your computer that showed the camera view to try and give yourself the idea of what's happening in the play. Best broadcast position, it's a small building, but the fairgrounds in Winston-Salem, you're about maybe 15 rows back, and you're right on center ice. It's just a perfect spot to call a game. And the fans there too, you're right behind fans, and they're turning around and cursing at you. And They have some real animated fans over there, and it made for some interesting games to call. And along with that, there was a lot of storylines between those two teams last year as well. What do I eat before a broadcast? So I am purely a eat after a broadcast kind of guy. Um, yeah, it's just the way I've always been. I don't know why. As you can see, I'm not afraid of eating. But for the most part, I don't know. It's just something I never liked doing was eating before a broadcast. I don't know if it's me just on the irritable bowel syndrome side of things that, you don't want to potentially have to leave the broadcast booth for any reason. So save any potential risk for after the game. After broadcast, a lot of late night drives from Athens to Woodstock. And it's more often than not one of three things. It's either Raising Cane's, and that's if they're not absolutely packed after a game on Friday or Saturday. And then it's Cookout, right to the right of Cheddar's, if you know. And then McDonald's. McDonald's is kind of like, it's open. And the last question I have for our quick fire here is, should broadcasters openly root for the team? So I think this is really dependent on a case-by-case basis. For example, I've been hired by Kennesaw State to do broadcasts for their teams. These go on ESPN Plus. Should I be going, absolutely ape what whenever Kennesaw State scores a goal or shoots a basket or hits a home run? No, I probably shouldn't be, because ESPN Plus is where both fans of both teams are trying to get their content and trying to watch the game and hear a broadcast. And I don't want to muddy those waters for either side. And I don't want them to get the wrong idea of what the broadcast is supposed to be. Now, when you tune in to the Athens Rock Lobsters on the Athens Rock Lobster YouTube channel or a Flow Hockey page, I think you know exactly what you're getting. And so I'm able to play that part of a homer a little bit more. And I think it makes it more enjoyable for the fans of the team to tune into because they know what they're getting into. And they know that they're, in a way, celebrating with me the big moments and the high stakes and high energy. And so that's my philosophy around a lot of that. Do I think it's right in every situation? Absolutely not. And you have to be careful about what kind of moments you pick to play the role of homer in as well. Especially in hockey, probably more than any other sport, with the fights that happen, with sometimes the off-ice stuff that happens, and also with some of the really nasty injuries that you see in the game as well. So, yeah, I think it's okay in minor league hockey to be a homer, but if you get yourself into a different environment, you've got to back up a little bit too. Well, this has been fun. I love talking about, I've got the best job in the world and I love to be able to talk about it. But the other job I love is to be able to bring you guys another podcast here. And we hope you enjoy this one. As always, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell here on YouTube to stay notified of all future content here on Peach State Puck. And then make sure you follow us on both your social media channels, whether it be Facebook, or you can follow me at Matteen Rad on Instagram. Keep an eye out for what we're doing on Reddit as well. And also make sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast material from. But until next time, which won't be next week, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Make sure you rejoin us here for another episode of Peach State Puck. So long.